time to react to the rest of this video while hopefully getting this shiny. Alright, time to start this video again.
June of 2072 saw the beginning of America's formal annexation of Canada, according to an issue of the Fallout 3 Capital Post newspaper. The Canadian public was enraged at this development, and a series of protests and riots sprang across the once sovereign nation. American occupying forces responded with unmitigated violence that would make the Boston Massacre look peaceful. In 2073, the Pan-Immunity Viron Project was initiated. Evidently concerned by the growing use of bioweapons in the Alaskan War, the U.S. government contracted WestTech. That company, initially commissioned to search for a cure to the new plague, to develop a general immunity agent against Chinese biochemical weapons. Leaning into their already robust genetic research on the new plague, WestTech hoped to create a sort of benign virus that could alter the DNA of an infected human and render it much more resilient to typical infections. This will become very important later. Chris Avalon's Fallout Bible tells us that in 2074, despite still fighting a defensive war for the North, the United States began an invasion of mainland China, though the document is frustratingly shy on the details. Whether this specific date remains canon post-Bethesda acquisition and Amazon adaptation is also suspect. Now, we don't know exactly when this next bulletin on the timeline occurs, but sometime after the Sino-American War began, but before 2077, I'm just guessing somewhere around 2074, give or take a year or two, a team of scientists led by a Dr. Kate Williams made a series of breakthroughs in energy science, culminating in the somewhat unexpected creation of a miniaturized cold fusion reactor. Cold fusion in science fiction typically refers to a process in which nearly unlimited energy can be produced from a nuclear fusion reaction at normal room or even cold temperatures, as opposed to hot fusion, which requires an enormous expenditure of energy to heat and is currently not viable at scale. Most nuclear energy today is produced with a fission reaction.
3DS.
Anyway, cold fusion is an idea that has been played around with in the real world, though so far it's never actually been produced. We've never produced a cold fusion reaction, and the energy it would create would still have to obey the laws of physics and be far from limitless. Regardless, the science fiction community tends to treat cold fusion as a sort of MacGuffin for unlimited free energy, and the Fallout show is doing just that. No matter, sometime amidst the Sino-American War, Dr. Kate Williams' team is able to produce a miniaturized cold fusion reactor. The scientists are elated. Not only can this discovery alleviate the global resource shortage, but it could negate the reasons for the ongoing war altogether. Alas, the Vault-Tec Corporation had found current tensions to be too profitable to allow to be cooled, and thus the company moved to rapidly buy out Kate Williams' lab and research from her funders and acquired all related data, ensuring that cold fusion technology could not be released to benefit the public nor end the war, and instead, they converted it into a proprietary asset. The move seems to have had radicalizing effects on Dr. Williams, who would soon find herself to be a member of various anti-government and anti-capitalist organizations. In 2075, WestTech's search for an antidote to Chinese bioweapons led to another unexpected breakthrough elsewhere. While the objective of a universal immunity agent to all enemy chemical weapons remained elusive, the Pan-Immunity Viron Project did produce a viral agent that could render single-celled organisms immune to radiation. When testing was expanded, first to flatworms and later small mammals, the PIV agent led not only to radioactive resilience, but a dramatic increase of size and aggression. the latter stimulated by changes in brain chemistry, and wild swings in intelligence were also identified in both directions. Officials in the US military saw potential for such an instrument to facilitate greater combat effectiveness among American infantrymen, i.e., super soldiers. And therefore, the decision was made for West Tech to relax their search for a general antidote to bioweapons and instead focus on cultivating this new biological agent they had developed. The Pan-Immunity Viron Project was retired, and the new viral instrument was named the Forced Evolutionary Virus, or FEV, and this project would go on to be among the most significant in the universe's history. Also, in 2075, as we learn in Fallout 4's old ArcJet systems building, by this year, the United States Space Administration was beginning preparations for a mission to Mars, commissioning the ArcJet company to produce a deep space transmitter capable of relaying messages from Earth to Mars in as close to real time as possible. This same company was also hired to build the booster engine for the eventual rocket that would be used. Internal company documents suggest that the mission was planned for no later than 2078, though it's hinted that the project was running very much behind schedule. Finally, as the year drew to a close, the American Defense Intelligence Agency began receiving reports of a potential fleet of Chinese stealth submarines invisible to radar and perhaps the naked eye, slowly staking out positions across America's western and even later eastern seaboards. When the Great War would eventually break out, these Chinese stealth subs would be responsible for delivering many of the nuclear payloads that would land upon the American homeland. The years 2076 and 2077 would be among the most decisive in the franchise's history, and our timeline becomes very dense during this period. January of 76 saw the United States government effectively nationalize the West Tech Corporation, deploying troops to secure the company's properties and labs and placing them all under the direct supervision of American military officers. Research on FEV, which by now had progressed into experimentation on larger mammals like dogs, raccoons, and soon even chimps, was deemed to be the company's top priority. A terminal entry left behind by a certain General Brock that we can read in Fort Strong in Fallout 4 reveals that by June of this year, an American invasion of the Chinese mainland had definitely begun, with the first shipments of T-51, a now upgraded variant of power armor compared to its T-45 predecessors, arriving on the front. Brock's terminal doesn't confirm the location of exactly where this invasion was occurring, but sparse references across the game suggest that over the next year and a half, US forces were engaged in heavy fighting over control of the cities of Shanghai and Nanjing along China's Yangtze River. Furthermore, another Fallout 4 newspaper alludes to a US Army presence in the city of Shantou on China's southern coast. And there are even a few faint hints of military action going on in the Gobi Desert, deep in China's northern interior. The precise timeline of the American invasion of China is extremely mysterious. While we have a variety of locations fighting was said to be occurring in, dates for these campaigns and battles are not recorded. Though now we can be confident that by June of 2076, an invasion of China was underway, and it would continue until the day the bombs fell. October marks a bright spot on an otherwise chaotic year as Nuka-Cola Quantum is released and quickly captivates the American market for a premium price. Back to the Fallout TV show, likely around the end of 2076 or early 2077, Cooper Howard, a war hero turned movie star who just so happens to have married a Vault-Tec executive, becomes acquainted with Kate Williams, the disillusioned creator of the cold fusion conductor now in the possession of Vault-Tec. Kate will go on to spend several months challenging Howard's patriotic notions about America and Vault-Tec as he becomes increasingly aware that neither entity is interested in ending the war. Cooper reluctantly agrees to Miss Williams' insistence that he use his fame and family ties to spy on Vault-Tec and move amongst the elite. Howard eventually, through snooping on his wife, discovers Vault-Tec's role in preventing the war from de-escalating. He even overhears his wife Barbara admit that the company is willing to drop the bombs themselves if necessary, though his wife would later reveal that she was coerced into saying that in Season 2. In January of 2077, the American liberation of Anchorage, Alaska seems to have been completed, with Chinese forces being driven from the city and apparently much of the state at large. There is some evidence that the Chinese commander, General Jing Wei, was killed or captured in the fighting, and the American press celebrated what must have felt like the nation's greatest victory since Iwo Jima. Several sources allude to peace talks opening up around this time as well. However, the Sino-American War very much carried on, with US troops continuing their invasion of the Chinese mainland and an ongoing struggle between the two powers for control of the Pacific. Furthermore, the Chinese appear to have downplayed their defeat at Anchorage considerably. In Fallout 4, a ghoulified Chinese submarine commander refers to the supposed Great American Victory as a joke, though it's unclear what he meant. Perhaps our understanding of this battle is greatly clouded by American propaganda. This same month, the United States government, which now effectively ran the West Tech Company, decided to relocate much of the nation's FEV research to a new facility in Northern California, just south of Yosemite National Park, the Mariposa Military Base. With a string of successful chimpanzee tests now firmly under their belt, the scientists and military advisors are finally ready to begin live human experimentation. And the newly built Mariposa Military Base is just the kind of heavily fortified, sufficiently remote installation suited for this kind of dirty work. The soldiers guarding the base, led by Colonel Robert Spindell and Captain Roger Maxon, are kept oblivious about the true nature of the work being done on the sublevels. The troops are led to believe that all that's happening is animal research to counter Chinese bioweapons. At the same time, on the other side of the country, near Huntersville, West Virginia, an Appalachian West Tech facility had a much less methodical plan for testing the FEV strains they were working on. Indeed, their lab simply released incrementally increasing amounts of the forced evolutionary virus into the Huntersville town water supply. Exact dates are somewhat sketchy, but a series of terminal entries and holotapes reveals that throughout the year 2077, Huntersville residents began to mutate. Their muscle mass continuously increased while their skin turned green, and the citizens became substantially more violent. The area was placed under a military quarantine, as soldiers from the 12th Mountain Division erected barricades around the perimeter and began clashing with the mutant inhabitants who sought to break out. Indeed, the Huntersville incident seems to represent the earliest known series of super mutant clashes in the Fallout IP. As far as we can tell, though, the government succeeded in keeping everything out of the public eye until the bombs came. Now, also in early 2077, presumably before March, for reasons we'll get into momentarily, Vault-Tec dispatched representatives to attend a major defense contractor summit in the city of Las Vegas. Among a variety of meetings, company agents were also poised to sit down with Robert House and discuss the potential sale of their cold fusion reactor, of which only one still exists apparently, to the business tycoon, who himself has been clandestinely planning to survive the coming war. But before the meeting could transpire, Cooper and his company executive wife, Barbara Howard, who by this point was having second thoughts herself, intervened, incapacitating Hank McLean, the Vault-Tec rep, in possession of the cold fusion diode and stealing it for themselves. The Howards were confident that cold fusion tech ought to be kept away from the company and turned over to the public. And coincidentally, one of the attendees of this defense contractor summit was the actual president of the United States. Through a friendly California congresswoman, Coop is able to arrange a very brief meeting with the commander-in-chief in the back of his car on the Strip, where he simply passes the cold fusion diode to the chief executive, and the president responds by saying, "You've done the right thing, son." with Howard totally unaware that by this point in history, the leader of the free world has already very much given up on the country and is deeply embedded within, seemingly, the leader of the Enclave. Within minutes of exiting the presidential motorcade, Howard is quickly arrested and realizes that his leader betrayed him. Between the months of March and April of 2077, presumably just after the Cold Fusion handoff, though we're not exactly sure, the president disappears from public life. An investigative report from the Boston Bugle we can read in Fallout 4 later reveals that he and much of his cabinet had fled the White House and established a new command center on a Poseidon Energy oil rig about 130 miles off the coast of San Francisco. This command post is dubbed by reporters Control Station Enclave, and the Boston Bugle notes that the commander-in-chief's retreat there gives credence to long-standing rumors of a shadow government running the show behind the scenes, implying that by the time of the Great War, the American public was catching on to the workings of the Enclave, and it likely constituted something of a popular conspiracy theory among the general public. By June of 2077, Robert House acquires the Rocket Engineering and Propulsion Company of Nevada, or REPCON, an aerospace research and manufacturing firm. House, already anticipating the Great War and planning to survive it, was looking further ahead than virtually any other player in the pre-war world, with the possible exception of the Enclave. But more on both their strategies later. With Alaska liberated and US forces now thoroughly on the offensive, besieging the Chinese mainland, you would think 2077 would have been a year of joy and celebration for the American public, perhaps now able to breathe a little bit easier with their country firmly reunited once again. But by midsummer of this year, various news reports suggest quite a different mood in the public. Indeed, the nation was being rocked by a series of food riots, complementing an existing, and even longer-lasting, energy shortage. The Fallout Bible tells us that American troops were regularly called up to suppress increasingly violent public reactions to rationing and government-mandated blackouts. Even as the fight was taken to China, the war was clearly pushing the American public to the breaking point, who were, no doubt, further provoked by the fact that their president had literally abandoned them. By September of this year, the country was officially in something of a mild civil war, as a coalition of landowners and doomsday preppers across Appalachia, calling themselves the Free Staters, specifically concentrated in West Virginia, declared their independence from the federal government. However, with the army already stretched paper thin, and with most of the rebels preferring to hide out in their fortified backyard bunkers anyway, military leaders chose to avoid direct confrontation with the rebellion, hoping they'd be able to merely contain it and bide their time for now until the war's end. The Free Staters would not be the only faction to seek their independence in the lead-up to the Great War, though. On October 10th, 2077, the Army Group assigned to garrison the Mariposa military base, that premier West Tech research facility in Northern California, made a horrifying discovery. While they were originally led to believe that the scientists here were testing anecdotes to enemy chemical weapons on animal subjects, somehow they learned the truth. That the researchers here were actually experimenting with the forced evolutionary virus upon live, unwilling human captives. The soldiers discovered groveling wartime prisoners being forcibly transformed into horrifying mutants on behalf of the federal government. Their response was revulsion, followed by mutiny. This is the genesis of what will become the Brotherhood of Steel. Colonel Robert Spindell, the commanding officer, is said to have suffered something of a nervous breakdown and been rendered incapacitated, but his second-in-command, Captain Roger Maxson, quickly ordered the scientists to be detained and later executed. His men, by all accounts, enthusiastically obeyed. By October 20th, Maxson would broadcast his unit's formal desertion from federal command, calling upon any commander with a conscience to do the same. Maxson anticipates a full-blown civil war and fortifies the Mariposa base, inviting the families of his men inside and expecting an imminent showdown with the government. Alas, that showdown would never come. federal authorities, evidently by this point so convinced of the coming nuclear apocalypse's imminence, barely seem to have registered the mutiny, and no effort to respond would be made. 2 days later, on October 23rd, 2077, all hell would break loose, and the Great War would finally begin. The exact nature of this exchange, who started it, and precisely why are unknown. However, a series of terminals we can read in an old Department of Defense building in Fallout 4 suggest that the American military at least believed that they were attacked first by China. At 12:03 a.m., the commander of the American Pacific Fleet reported 3 unidentified submerged objects suspiciously close to the coast of California, likely Chinese stealth submarines. At 3:37 a.m., a large squadron of enemy warplanes were detected off the coast of the Bering Strait, headed southeast. At 9:17 a.m., American nuclear detection systems reported at least 3 incoming ICBMs. 4 minutes later, NORAD reports several more passing over northern airspace. Air raid sirens go off nationwide, and citizens registered to vaults are told to report to their assigned bunker as soon as possible. Surprisingly, despite the rather short notice, most, or at least a great many dwellers, make it in time. Bit of a side note, but the Fallout TV show sort of addresses the rather shocking fact that most vaults were able to close with all their dwellers intact. In a pre-war flashback sequence to a Vault-Tec advertisement, it's mentioned that even before the bombs began to fall, many bunkers were already populated in these 5-year trial runs that were being done. Anyway, by 9:26 a.m., the order is given for United States nuclear batteries to respond, and America begins unleashing its own volleys across the Pacific. As all of this is happening, non-aligned nations use the opportunity to settle their own atomic scores. Indeed, the games contained vague hints that the situation in Europe was even worse than that in the States. Within an hour, the old world is consumed by nuclear fire, and something new will begin to rise out of the ashes. Alright, now before we move any further along with this video, I think it's necessary for something of a fourth wall break to address several contentious lore points surrounding the Great War, the Enclave's own endgame, and the nature of the vaults, as touching on these subjects will make many of the more interesting and strange points later on in our timeline much more easy to understand. First things first, who shot first? All of the evidence we have suggests that the US government at least thought itself to be on the receiving end of a Chinese first strike, and merely responded. Indeed, later Fallout games reveal that even centuries after the Great War, Enclave members insist that the US did not pull the trigger first. Furthermore, in a 2023 interview with a YouTuber TKS Mantis, Tim Kaine, the original creator of the Fallout franchise, he was the first person to begin working on the game and its source code in the late 90s back at Interplay, before the company eventually recognized its potential and began assigning more resources to the title. Anyway, according to Tim Kaine, the full responsibility for firing the first shot was on China, who did so in response to concerns about American FEV research. Take a listen.
And also, we don't come across as good as the reason we got nuked is bio weapons were illegal, and somehow China found out we were doing FEV, and they're like, you have to stop it, and we went, okay. And all we did is move it. All we did is move it over
Earth-shattering,
to the
what you just said.
Really? Is that stuff people don't know?
Well, people actually debate over who shot first, like a
They do?
solo thing.
Oh, well, then I don't know. Who knows? It was
No,
probably some rogue
well,
nation.
that movie they were making.
Now, of course, the Fallout franchise was sold from Interplay to Bethesda in the mid-2000s, and it's